Hey guys, this is May and welcome to May's Conversations, a brand new series where I introduce astrological concepts and invite guests on the show, people who have these indicators in their chart to share about are these myths true and how do they experience it in their lives. Now today we have two guests, Lacie and Cheyenne, but of course before we start getting into, they have a lot to share with us, but we also have to explain to our viewers who may not be familiar with this term, what exactly is Mercury Retrograde. Now, every single person has got the planet Mercury in their charts. However, when you have it retrograde, it's a bit of an illusion that the planet is going backwards. And I know lots of people want to get more technical information. You can refer to the links in the bio, in the description, where we'll send you to some of the previous videos I've done so you can find out more. But today, rather than talking about theory, let's really talk about people in real lives. How do you experience it? Now, the thing is, there are a lot of myths. And the internet has not been very kind to Mercury retrograde. So it's been said that people with Mercury retrograde are they're slower than other people, they take longer than most people to learn things. So let's start with some myth busting first, okay? So if you could introduce yourself and then also tell me, how have you experienced it? Are you really slower than others?
Hi, my name is Cheyenne. I coach ADHD people, solopreneurs, small business owners. I also have an interest in cybersecurity. So
have you found that having Mercury retrograde, is it true that you're slower than other people?
Well, maybe in terms of response, if you ask me something that I have never thought before, then I would probably have that 1-2 second pause. I might give you a okay, before I come up with something that would make sense. I'm not sure if this makes sense.
Yeah. So, for example, an interview like this, does it make you nervous that you have to give a response immediately?
I would say I try to prepare for it.
So you prepared for
yes,
this one?
I prepared. Yes, I prepared.
It's anticipate the questions.
Yes, totally.
Okay, how about Lacie? Do you experience this? Are you slower than other people?
Yeah, maybe I introduce myself.
Yes, please, yes.
Hi, I'm Lacie. I'm an astrologer in training. Whether I'm slow, I think sometimes now, I think this is Mercury retrograde coming into effect where I have to think about what I want to say and I need to say. So it doesn't come naturally to me. The conversations in my mind doesn't come out very natural, I guess. So here doing this is sort of nerve-wracking because I don't know what I'm prepared to say or what I'm supposed to say, I guess.
And did you also experience this possibly before that when you were in the corporate world, when you have to do presentations?
I've never noticed that I do preparations a lot until I realized that it's not normal.
So I have ADHD, I have procrastination issues, but I start thinking about that presentation the very moment I know I have to do it. So if I have 3 months to prepare for it, I think and obsess about it for 3 months. I start putting in the framework, I start putting in stuff, but I will not edit it, I will not show it. I will do a lot of research and I will still freak out even just before I present.
Even with 3 months preparation?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Oh wow, okay. So basically what I'm hearing is that if you have 3 months to prepare, you take 3 months.
Oh yes.
Okay, do you experience the same thing?
Yes, the more time you give me, the more time I'm going to make full use of it. Yeah.
And this sharing is so important because, the internet is not always kind to Mercury retrograde. I mean, I've seen this stuff on the internet where they said that, Mercury retrograde people are slower or insinuating that they are stupider than other people because they take a long time to do things. But now what we're hearing is that they take a long time because they think they have more time and they can actually do it in 2 days. So that's what I'm kind of hearing. Yeah. Alright, okay, so now there is another myth. Okay, let's do more myth busting. That people with Mercury retrograde don't do well in school. They specifically struggle with languages and sometimes with numbers, in mathematics. So let's start with Cheyenne. Did you experience that?
I would say I struggle with it a lot in primary school, early childhood. I have dyslexia, it still affects me now. Maybe dyscalculia, but I was actually non-verbal. For 5 days, I could just say one single word grunts and like, ugh.
For how long? Like how old were you?
I was probably, I think the social aspects only kicked in when I was about 10 or 11, where I realized that crap, I can't just do my exams and survive, because in an all-girls school, you need a bit of social factor, and I was dying with no one helping me. I had 0 friends. So that's when I started learning. I literally had to, because I read a lot, I read like literally a book a day. So a 10-year-old to take How to Win Friends and Influence People, literally take the script and experiment it on my classmate. Yeah, that's the thing I did.
So Lacie, did you struggle in school? Anything close to what she's describing?
No, I never struggled in school actually. I consider myself quite intelligent. I noticed I pick things up quite fast. I catch on things quite easy. But I did notice when you're talking about languages just now, I did realize that when I became an adult and out in the working world, I realized I tried to learn a few languages. First, I started with German, and then I found that it was too tough. And then I tried Japanese, and then I didn't finish it. And then the last one I did was French, which I took for embarrassingly 3 years. But I struggle with speaking. I can read perfectly, but I can't speak at all. As in I struggle, and I did wonder why I was struggling when I was in the class every time. So I do have problems with languages.
This is very interesting for me, because when we understand Mercury retrograde, it's I think the viewers will start to realize that there is no difficulty in the understanding or even in the reading and the writing. But theory says that Mercury retrograde the hindrance is in the externalization. So that means it's like you kind of have the idea that's in your head. So even when Lacie talked about learning a language, like you can write it, but the speaking is hard because there's a bit of that on the spot, like you have to give a response, and then you have the sentence in your head. But then when you have to say it with your mouth, and then it's like, it's just not...
No, it doesn't come out as eloquent as it is in the mind. Like in the mind, I think I'm like, oh my God, I can speak so well and I can speak so nicely and it's so fluent. But then when it comes out, it's like, stop.
Yeah, so let's try another myth, right? Because Mercury retrograde theory also says that most of the time, writing and speaking can be challenging, but that is a lot easier for you to sort of find an alternative way to communicate. Like famous example would be Lady Gaga. She's not a very good speaker per se, but she speaks through her costume and her dance moves. And is that something that both of you experience also? Anyone?
For me, I think I detest writing with a passion. But I try to communicate in other ways. So like I dabble with coding. I also convey my images in, not just images, but I convey concepts in flowcharts, decision trees, and all this. I try to paint stories that sometimes are quite visual, but I may not be the most visual person. So all these things help a lot, or I may just borrow ideas and thread them together where people think I'm eloquent, but actually it's just stitching together what already exists. Yeah.
I think for me it's a lot about storytelling. I convey my messages through storytelling, like I can, but whereas for me, writing out an essay or a composition or even doing my interpretations, I struggle a lot to put a layman's language or put it into a language that is, I struggle to find words to replace a lot of the astro language. But if I do casual talk with people, then I find that I can actually tell my messages or convey in much better way, I guess, with like storytelling instead of just writing out. That's my alternative way of
I think a lot of the viewers are also wondering, like, if all these traits are true, and that people actually with Mercury retrograde actually struggle with some of these communication, doesn't it get in the way of your career or what you need to do? And it just happens that today both my guests are in the helping profession. Lacie is an astrologer in training, and Cheyenne does a lot of coaching. So the thing is, the nature of the work is such that you have to talk to people and you do have to respond to an on-the-spot situation. And how is this a challenge so far, or have you found it to be a bit kind of like a net gain? Are there advantages to having Mercury retrograde? Right? You want to go first?
I would say the helpful thing is actually you prep, at least for me, I prep for a lot of scenarios. I would say that I don't take things for granted. I tend to look beyond the surface value because it's easy for a person to say, oh, I'm feeling this and this because of problem A. But actually, that's not the real problem. Because with Mercury retrograde, you doubt yourself all the time, right? So you carry that trait into coaching, but in a healthy manner, and you're like, okay, this I don't think is the real reason. Can we go deeper?
I call it like maybe I try to pride myself that okay, I'm so hardworking, like, you know, I'll make sure that I check and everything and find out every information that I can, and I do a lot of research. So even my homework, like, you know, so if you say is it an advantage or disadvantage, I think it's both, but I've learned to make good use of it. I would say the good thing is I'm always very detailed about a lot of things. Like I pay attention to the detail. I don't just, so for even my consultations, it's a lot of work. So I end up preparing a lot and I should be more efficient. But I also know for sure that I am so well prepared that I won't be caught off guard and I won't miss out anything, and it's beneficial to my client, I guess.
So one more thing I want to ask is that both of you studied a bit of astrology to sort of get a sense of like yourself. I think at first when you came to class, it was like that. And then when you learned about Mercury retrograde, it shouldn't have surprised you in the sense that you would have seen some of these traits playing out in your life. And what difference did it make? Like at the beginning when you first got in touch with this?
I think for me, it was very helpful in the sense of assuring myself that I'm not broken, I'm not wonky, and I do have strengths, and actually it becomes my advantage. I think the perspective shift not just gives confidence, but also it helps me put in the work that it's not because of fear, but because I can really do this, I can really give a lot more value.
Were you surprised when you first found out about Mercury retrograde?
No, yes, I actually was. It was a surprise and a relief because it's like I thought, you know, I was questioning why couldn't I understand so many of the things, like when I was doing my Chinese metaphysics, and then later when I started astrology, and I was like, why don't I get, like, when I first started, I knew nothing about any of the planet. I know nothing about houses and whatever. And with some of the classmates that started, so I was like, maybe they did have a background and I was the only one without the background and kind of thing. But then I found like some of them didn't have it. And then so that's not an excuse, right? So it's like, then I was like, okay, so maybe I'm just slow. But when May explained what Mercury retrograde was, my first thing was, oh my, now I have a reason. It's like you have a sickness or illness that has bothered you for some time and you couldn't find, there's no, like, you couldn't find a reason why, like you go to every doctor and they couldn't explain why you are like that. And then now somebody tell me that, oh, it's because of this planet that's causing havoc in my life. And I have always worked very hard, and so because it's in my natal chart. And so I live with it, but it was more apparent in the last few years, and that's when, so finally I get a diagnosis of why I was slow in certain areas and why I'm comfortable talking to people and why I'm not comfortable in some areas, or why why do I feel like I'm would be put on the spot in some situations. So now it explains a lot of things, and it is a relief, but it also empowers me now, as in now I know what to do with it and I can use it rather than surrendering to it and like, okay, this is it. But also good that I can use it as an excuse sometimes when I don't know what to say. And then I can like, okay, my Mercury retrograde is playing out. Don't blame me.
Do you guys have any like advice or any kind of recommendations to make to people with Mercury retrograde?
Oh, sure. I would say, like, actually learning improv, learning what do you call that, method acting actually helps quite a lot, because it forces you to inhabit that role where you are not really you, but it helps you step out so that you can help other people. I had this epiphany recently that I think for people who struggle with self-esteem, if you keep all your gifts inside you, you are not giving out what you could have given to the world. And because of that, the world is deprived of your portion of light and goodness. And because of you, choosing to be where you are and not stepping up, well, someone might have benefited, but you wouldn't know, right? Because you didn't step out. So I think it is actually very important to step out despite your weaknesses, because I think when you acknowledge your weaknesses, you make it work for you. Of course, I still advocate like going really for your strengths and all this, but sometimes when you work on your weakness so much that it actually becomes your strength because you have learned a new way of living, go for it. Express what you need to, because every one of us have something to give. There are lives that you can impact. There are spheres of influence around you that maybe we cannot touch, but you can touch in a way that suits you.
What you're also trying to say is like, what is our advice to other people is to find an alternative way of communicating. Like, I feel like it doesn't restrict you from doing what you need to do. You would end up finding a different way of communication. So for me, when I struggle, so I struggle sometimes to communicate with my boys, and by talking to them I realize that I don't exactly say, it doesn't come across what I meant to say sometimes. So what I've started doing, or even before, like I would send text to them, and it would be long text to them, and I actually explain it so much further where I'm coming from, because when I try to tell them verbally, it doesn't get in, and because I couldn't express myself verbally, like it doesn't come across how I imagine it in my head. And I've realized by writing it down, like obviously we don't write a lot now, we text, and then so by texting it, they get where I come from, and I realized that it helps a lot. Like I find that way to communicate instead of verbally communicating, which I'm not so good at. So I think take whatever you have with it, even if you have Mercury retrograde, like you will learn to find alternative way of making it better.
Yeah, that is very, very awesome. Okay, so at this point, I definitely want to thank my two guests. They have been very brave. These are people with Mercury retrograde in their chart, and I've completely just, put them on my very first episode. So thank you very much. And for our viewers, I think what we have learned today is that Mercury retrograde people actually do put in so much more effort into putting their ideas together, and at the same time, it is not so much that there's no content. In fact, I think they have the opposite problem in the sense that there is a lot of content, but finding a way to be able to convey that. And like what Lacie and Cheyenne have shared, sometimes writing it out, finding alternative ways could just be the best way to use your Mercury retrograde. So for those of you who found this very interesting, you'll find in the description many other resources that we've added there, including a free online chart generator if you'd like to check all these things out. So until the next episode, I'll see you guys then.
Bye.
Bye.